Hello world, I am Curtis Simpson and this is the Jectives Typography News number 7 for June 26, 2025. Today is Thursday and I have 3 stories that I'm going to talk about today. Fast Company started a new design podcast. Glitterbox got a campaign by Studio Moross, and then Pearson is wanting to rebrand or is rebranding as an AI powered learning system rather than wanting to be known for textbooks. So I have this thread in my brain that like makes all of these come together and make sense. But hopefully I can convey that practically on this live stream right now. Because typically this is something that I would practice or that I would I would formulate a little bit more and make an outline. But when we're doing these daily these daily news live streams, it's a little more difficult to get things perfect. So maybe this will be a huge dumpster fire, but I'll be back tomorrow to try again. So let's go ahead and put this on the screen. I've still got my Notion, outline over there on the left. So if you want a little bit of preview of what's going on, that's what we're going to be doing, like I just said. But it just helps me in case one of my tabs gets closed. So let's start out. Fast Company has another podcast. There are plenty of Fast Company podcasts and there are plenty of design podcasts. And now Fast Company has one called By Design. I will say that I'm not always like in line with Fast Company in terms of the way they present things or in the way that they talk about things. Let me try to explain this. I think they do really good reporting. They have great interviews. This interview with Michael Bierut, anything with Michael Bierut you're going to learn from it. If you don't want to listen to this one, go Google him or look him up on YouTube. Go read an article. Anything he has to say, I've never left like a session of like reading an interview with him or a presentation or anything and felt like I wasted my time. I always feel like I learned something. There's always something that resonates with me. And at this point in his career, he's kind of stepping back as like a lead partner in at Pentagram and being more like from a strategic director. And they get into that a little bit. But as far as Fast Company goes, a lot of times they inject politics into almost everything that they talk about. So it's supposed to be design, it's supposed to be technology, but a lot of it ends up being shown in like a very political light. So I don't really, it's not even that I necessarily disagree with many of the things that they say. It's just, I don't care. I want to talk about design. I want to talk about typography. That's what I want to listen to. And I guess that's their prerogative, right? Like they can do that. I can be more objective and just kind of present the facts here without a political bias. But if that kind of thing bothers you or grates on you, maybe this won't be the podcast for you, but it's a podcast nonetheless, and it's new, and they're, a giant publication. So they're worth talking about. It's called By Design. And the tagline here says, design is no longer just about aesthetics. It's shaping the way we live, work, and interact with the world. And immediately I'm just in my brain, I'm like, was design ever just about aesthetics? I feel like design is separate from art in the sense that like art is about aesthetics and emotions and, it's about this artistic vision. But design has always been less about aesthetics and more about solving a problem, because you're not always just designing something visually. Side note, or small critique, I guess. But these are the hosts, Mark Wilson, Liz Stenson. I think they did a pretty good job. Obviously, they're professionals, so they're going to do a decent job. You can listen to this wherever you listen to podcasts. I listen to it on YouTube, so that's what I'm going to link in the description. I'll link both of these. I'll link the website and this. We're going to come back to this after we talk about the 2 branding exercises. But I wanted to mention it up front because like most of these introductions, I give you something else you can go listen to. If you want to go listen to this instead of listening to me, I'm not going to be mad about it. I'll come. I think that Michael Bierut is going to have more words of wisdom for you than this news right now is going to have. So just like it's their prerogative to talk about politics, this is your prerogative to go watch that instead. Let's talk about Studio Moross and Glitterbox for their 2025 season. I'm going to take a drink of water first. This is on Creative Boom, so I'm going to link this as well. Everything will be linked. Everything will be linked. So Studio Moross, headed by Aries Moross. That's a whole other rabbit hole to dive down. Sometimes I bring up someone's name and I purposely say, like, go look into this person. Go look into Studio Moross. Go look into Aries Moross. If you want to see older content by them, look for Kate Moross. But really cool, tons of projects, and this Glitterbox campaign is absolutely no exception. So I'm gonna look at we'll look at the Creative Boom coverage of it right here, and I'm just gonna point out a few things they're saying. But then we'll look at the typography, and we'll look at the Studio Moross portfolio entry on their website, and then we'll move on to the next thing. But so Glitterbox is basically it's a record label, but it's also like a festival, and they have DJs. You can go to their YouTube channel right now, and they probably have like a 24/7 live DJ. If not, they have a mix. I know when you go to their website, they have music playing 24/7. Really cool. But you can see right off the bat, this imagery is very striking. It's going to be, you immediately are either going to be attracted to it, and it's gonna be like, oh, this is for me, or maybe you can appreciate the aesthetics of it and be like, I get what they're doing, that's cool, but it's not for me. Or maybe you'll be completely repelled by this if it's just absolutely not your thing. Me, I'm in the second camp. I don't ever see myself going to a Glitterbox festival. I've probably aged out of that at this point. But these designs are incredible, and they only get better. I'll talk in a little more detail about the concept, but I just want to give you like a quick view of it. They basically got these 5 archetypes for muses, and it's much better explained, or it's much better demonstrated on the Studio Moross website, but I just want to give you a look at it so we can start talking about the typography, because that's what we're doing here after all, objectives. We're talking about typography. But you can see there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot going on. There's a ton of different typography going on. And they've got this logo type here that they're saying they kind of use it as like a masthead. So you can see this Glitterbox. It's on everything, and that's the main logo, but they've got a bunch of alternate logos using other typography, other lettering. And I love the way that this brand comes together, the way that this campaign comes together. And there's something here at the bottom that I want to point out. And it says, in sustainability circles, we talk about longevity by adaptability, building a system that can evolve and reduce the need for constant rebranding and the inevitable waste of reprinting everything in sight. It says there's also a subtle refusal to chase the current obsession with brutalist minimalism. Neon gradients and distress type and cheeky portraits might feel retro camp to some, but they reject the grayscale anonymity that still clings to much of the club culture. In short, color is back on the menu, and it's ordering the house special. Great writing there from Creative Boom. Let's see who wrote this. This is by Abby Bamford. Very nice, Abby. But they mention that the typography is by Dum Dum Studio. So Dum Dum Studio has this giant family of typefaces called Serial. I was not previously familiar with this. I'm sure that I've seen this on fonts in use before, but it's not something that I ever understood the depth of. So we're going to look at that right now, because this is a typography channel. They've got Serial A, Serial, and then like a bunch of variations on that. They've got this Serial Aspirina, which is basically like a pixel version. And they've got Serial B, which is kind of like what you would use for body copy, UI, things that you don't want to be distressed. When you have information that needs to be legible, I think you're going with Studio B. Dum Dum, I have to say, as good as these fonts are, as good as these typefaces are, this website is awful. Like, it's barely usable. I I try to be as objective as possible, and I don't think that anyone is going to disagree that this website is just not good. But it does do the bare minimum, and we're gonna power through. But I just wish that they don't even tell you anything about this font, right? There's no description, there's no anything telling us anything about Serial. You just kind of figure it out on your own. So that's what we're gonna do. Serial A, if you think back to these posters and stuff that we were looking at, remember those. Serial A, this is input, output, there's outline, let's let them load. Outline, there's sharp, there's blur. So like some of them had like the rounded edges on it. It's going to be the blur ones. There's bold, nice. And then there's elongated monospace. So it's a monospace that's like, instead of like making the eye have the top bar and the bottom bar, they just made it real fat. And you can see that on some of the posters, and you look at them and you think like, oh, this must be custom type. This must be like, some kind of lettering almost, because it's so crazy and chaotic. And we're going to see a font here in a minute that's just literally called Serial Chaotic. But Dum Dum Studio has done such a good job with this typeface, and Studio Moross has done such a good job implementing and choosing this typeface. And it's entirely possible that Glitterbox was already using some of these. Maybe it's not entirely on Studio Moross, but Studio Moross has done an incredible job of implementing it, even if this wasn't their choice. The slanted versions, they're just variations on the slanted. You get back slant, front slant, incredibly slanted. And those work well later. They've got some things that are going in diagonal, and then they're using things slanted to kind of offset that. It's pretty cool. But now we're going to get into some more interesting ones. They've got the scan. Even this large, you can't make it very large. Like, it goes from here to here. I guess maybe I could zoom in. We'll see if it breaks the site. Yeah, that works a little bit. So you can see, let's just take this down a little bit. Okay, so you can see this is scan, ugly scan. Like, this is a font. You can type whatever you want into this right now. Like, it's not just, let's get back to like the original things though. Ugly scan, and this is an editable font. This is something that you would look at and you would think like, oh, somebody had to edit that in Photoshop or in Affinity Photo, or put it through some kind of filter to get this effect. But this is just in the font. Sticker, bad scan, and I don't know how much of this has I don't know how much these have alternates for. I was going to try to get the trial fonts, but like I said, the website's awful. And I couldn't even select the fonts that I wanted to try and request trials for. So Dum Dum Studio, your fonts are great. Serial, this is awesome. Your website is awful. But we've got a pen version, a pencil version, a rough version. These here, you've got the monospace pixel, not that interesting. The B, like I said, this is going to be more of like, this one is the least unhinged, the least chaotic. This one's just perfectly legible. It's going to be great for body copy, or it's going to be great for times, dates, things that need to be very, very obviously legible and readable, and that someone can just get the information right. We've got some more slanted there. But then we get into Serial Blur. So these are going to be real rounded ones. And they've got some funny names on here. Blurrer, Blurrest, Blurred, Blurry. And you can see there's some variation in these. I feel like this one's Bleed. I feel like the names aren't super descriptive, but at some point you'll probably know which one you want to use, and you'll just go with that. This is where they get really crazy, really chaotic. So this one's called Serial B Chaos. And you've got Frenzy, Ripple, Disorder, Fluxus, and Havoc. And look at this. Like, this is, like I said before, this is an editable font. Like, I'm not saying that you can read that, but it's it's crazy to me that this is actually built in to the typeface, to the font file. Like, I don't know. Just A plus, S tier. And then serial C is even more legible. And you've got serial C squared, and then you've got serial D, which looks like a more compressed version. So you've got a few different variations, and then you've even got a slab one here. Oh, they're calling it typewriter. But I think that the ones near the top, all those different variations of A, are what we really want to look at when we're talking about Glitterbox and talking about Studio Moross. And I'll give you this great visual here while I take another drink of water, and you can kind of get an idea for what we're getting ourselves into. So, like I said, you're immediately going to be attracted, repelled, or just in awe of these visuals. This says, we gave Glitterbox a refreshed look for its 2025 season, elevating its visual identity while keeping the brand's core DNA. And I think that's an incredibly important part of this thread that I said that I'm going to try and weave through this entire conversation. So keep that in mind when we come back to the Michael Bierut interview and when we talk about Pearson. But yeah, so they're not, this is a campaign, they're not entirely rebranding Glitterbox, but what they're doing is just taking it up to 11. They're pushing the colors, they're pushing the fonts, they're pushing this system. And they talk about how they've created this system in the Creative Boom article, which again I will link. 3 days of videos in a row have my voice gone, apparently. But they've put together this system that will allow the in-house designers or whatever team is working on this to be able to publish content that's not going to look like the same template over and over and over. It's more of pieces that can like modularly be put together and not look super repetitive. So here come the archetypes. There's Pink Punk, and you can see like it is very punk rock. It looks like photocopied paper over and over and over. Oh gosh, what is that? I can't even think of what the style is now. If you've seen the old punk rock posters, this is going to look incredibly familiar, right? But look at these. I want to point these here out. There are logo variations. So they're not changing this, what they were considering like to be the masthead, this main Glitterbox logo, but they do have variations, and they have variations for each of the 5 archetypes. So this is Pink Punk, and you've got 3 different logo variations here. Super cool. And then you can see the visuals, just very striking. But look at the typography, and you can see this is going to be Dum Dum Studios Serial A sticker on these ones that are like kind of folded. You can see that A that's kind of folded right here. And you can see some of these that are going at angles. I'm sure they probably did slant some of these at different angles and kind of emphasize even more what the typeface is doing on its own. But when I first saw this Los Angeles above the Avalon Hollywood, this Los Angeles right here, I assumed that they must have edited this. I hate when those things are just playing over and over. I assumed they must have edited this in Photoshop or something like that. But no, as we saw, that's just how the font is. And that's incredibly useful for a designer, because as cool as this would be if it was made in Photoshop, it would be incredibly inefficient to have to re-edit this every single time. So having a typeface, choosing a typeface that's this well designed is just a godsend for a project like this. So you can see it's not just the posters and stuff. They've got really cool video visuals and things like that. Now we're moving on to the next archetype. This is It Girl. We've got a new font. We've got, this is probably the Studio C or in Serial C or D, because those were the more condensed, more traditional looking ones. But look, we've got 3 new alternate logos here. And these aren't all using, obviously these logos aren't using Serial. Serial's being used for all of the other typography. But it still somehow manages to feel like Glitterbox, despite being an entirely different archetype, an entirely different muse, an entirely different, aesthetic and color. And how does this still work? This only works with great design, with consistent typography, because you can still see that you've got, even though you're no longer using the stickers and stuff like that, like with the more distorted text, you've still got Serial being used, and it feels the same, even though it's being used in a very different way. Now, next we've got Playa del Pol, like a little bit of a stripper vibe going on here. And you've got different colors again here, but we've got the same masthead up top, the same typography, we're still using Serial. They've got bolder fonts on this part, and we've got a little bit different distressing and things like that. Got them spaced real close together, so they're overlapping. But this all still somehow manages to feel cohesive, and it really is coming down to a huge portion of that is coming down to the typography, because the voice still sounds the same, right? Even though these are entirely different, the voice based on the font feels very cohesive. I think the Lovers is my favorite one. I just love this, like, I don't even know what this would be, like 70s or 80s. Just look at that. The glows, the little oh, what are those even called? The starburst? No, it's not a starburst. The little blings, you know what I'm talking about. I love those. Gosh, that just looks so cool. Like the texture on that, the typography, and again, it's a really super bold Serial A. Yeah, I think that's Serial A still. But super bold, but they've done, they did have to do, put some Photoshop filters on there for this one. That's not built into the font, but they're probably using the blur version of the font to get those rounded edges to start with. And then they're just doing a single effect that they can apply. Maybe it's built up, maybe there's several different layers to that effect, but a single style that they can apply to that and still do these things very efficiently, I'm assuming. And then we've got a couple more Glitterbox alternate logos here. But yeah, so we come back to it and we can look at these different fonts here. Let me refresh this so we can get the original typefaces or the original words. But you can come back and you can see now, after looking at all these, where we came, how we got there with all of these different versions of it. There's the sticker one, and you can see those S's there. Like if we go back to the top of this, you can see those S's in this punk version here with the Los Angeles. So you can see, as much as that looks like it would have to be like painstakingly done, the font and the execution and the design direction and everything about this is just amazing. And unfortunately, now we're going to go talk about Pearson. And it's such a bummer, but that's what we're here to do. So let's do it. I led with the first thing because if you're starting this, I wanted you, to have something good. Let's go look at Pearson. I think 90 to 95% of us, 99% of us, when we think of Pearson, we probably think of textbooks. This is the PR Newswire. I have this one linked just because this is like their official, what they want to say. I don't know. They're saying more than just a refreshed logo. The rebrand represents a deep understanding of the evolving needs of learners worldwide. And I do think that there is this push. Let me go ahead and switch to the face cam for a second. I do understand that there's this push to learn outside the classroom, outside the textbook. Maybe you're watching Jectives videos because you want to learn a little bit about typography and you don't want to go sit in a classroom. And I know I've learned plenty of things on, you know, on YouTube, on back in the day, lynda.com. Now that it's linkedin.com, LinkedIn Learning, it's pretty trash, if we're being honest. But there's been plenty of things from tutorials from people on YouTube that I've learned that taught me so much more than I learned in school. And that's not to say anything bad about my teachers. It's just you can't learn everything in a classroom. I do understand, this article is by Design Week, by the way. I do understand where Pearson is coming from when they're doing this rebrand, and where they're looking at like, hey, maybe there's a little bit of a backlash against like school being too expensive. Maybe people aren't going to be using physical textbooks. Maybe we can't get away with like renting you a digital textbook for that much longer. I think that they are, they're investing in all kinds of different education things. And if you look at the history of Pearson, Pearson is a huge conglomerate. It's not just textbooks. They push textbooks, for the last few decades or whatever. They really did invest in education for a long time. And it's what most of us probably know them for, but it's not the only thing they do. So for them to pivot in this way, it's not entirely out of character because they've existed almost 200 years and they've pivoted plenty of times over that, over these centuries. Otherwise, they wouldn't still exist. This is going to be subjective, but I question the thought process here. I don't know. I'm starting to wonder if some of the AI stuff is like the emperor's new clothes. Like, is everyone just pretending that this is the future? Is this the same as like blockchain and NFTs and the Internet of Things and cloud and mobile first and all these things? Like, all of these things had some practicality. They all existed in some form. But does a textbook company need to be AI powered? I don't know. Let's look at the typography. Let's look at the branding. That's what we're mostly here for. But just keep this thought in the back of your brain while we look at this story. Landor rebrands Pearson to broaden its education positioning. And when I look at this, if this was a brand new brand, if I'd never heard of Pearson, I would see this and I'd be like, oh, cool. Like, it's, a learning platform. There's a bunch of different learning platforms that have courses and things like that. This doesn't seem like a bad thing. I might look into this. I'm making a mess. But when you think about what Pearson is and what it means to a lot of people, I just wonder if they're making a mistake. And maybe they're not. I'm one person. They're a giant conglomerate that's existed forever, since I think 1844. And I've existed since the 80s. So yeah, but here is where I wonder what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and read this whole sort of section. It looks like more than it is, but they've got paragraphs that are one sentence long because that's how we read these days. Okay, let's go. Today, we are known as an educator textbook company, and we're on a mission to change that, says Pearson's Vice President of Global Brand, Rachel Exton. The rebrand is part of the company's effort to present itself less as a publisher and more a provider of inspiration across someone's lifetime, from formal education to vocational learning and enterprise upskilling. Cool. No problem with, expanding, which way would that be? Vertically, right? Horizontally, vertically, just expansion in general. No problem with that. Like, if you're a good company at education, I trust you. And I used you in high school. I used you in college. I will get out of school. Like, I want to learn something new. Pearson, boom. Yeah, let's go get it. This next paragraph. Our ambition is to be the global leader in AI-powered learning, empowering both educators and learners to unlock better outcomes through smarter, more personalized experiences. You're starting to lose me. Let's look at the branding. That's what we're really here for. I don't want to get too caught in the weeds. I don't want to get too typography adjacent. It's going to happen, but we're going to look at the typography here. The new logo is designed by Landor's in-house typography team. I'm like 99.9% sure. I read it on here somewhere. But I'm not catching it on like a quick scan. So let's go ahead and show it to you right here. Pearson, we saw it up top and it looked fine in these sort of images right here. I would maybe, if I saw this, I would think maybe it was an advertisement for these headphones. But cool. It looks clean. It looks corporate. It looks AI powered for sure. And they're talking about the little ripple. It says the new logo comprises a wave symbol and a word mark. The logo is a symbol of momentum. The wave isn't just a design flourish, it's a statement. Learning sets off a chain reaction. It doesn't stop at knowledge. It moves through lives, careers, communities. We're getting into some marketees there, but okay. They talk about the color palette a little bit, and then they talk about the typeface that they're using. We're going to look at the typeface. The typography and the logo and the actual typeface the brand is using are two different fonts, so they're not related. But we're going to look at the actual font that you can download for free on Google Fonts. The brand's typeface is Plus Jakarta Sans. What a name, right? It gives Pearson clarity with character, he adds. It's clean, flexible, and legible across every touch point, but it's not sterile. There's a warmth in its rhythm and openness. It speaks the language of modern learning, smart, inclusive, and ready to scale. Again, some marketees there, but it is a very good typeface. And down here, it even says that it also supports Latin, Cyrillic, and Vietnamese, which is really important. They are a global brand. They have global education. They have education here in Brazil, where I'm living right now. But you can see a little bit more of how the logo is going to be used, some icons and stuff like that. But as soon as I saw this P, because before we were seeing it like this, let's zoom in a little bit if we can. Well, that's as much they're going to let us. So we were seeing it like this with the ripple ahead of the Pearson, but then we come down and we can see how they're planning to use it at other points. And to me, this looks like an earplug. I don't know if anyone else thought about that, but this earplug is what this looks like to me. And it kind of, I don't know. We'll leave it at that. I'll objectively leave it at that and inject less of my subjective opinions. But yeah, so this is what the rebrand is. It looks clean. It looks corporate. It looks like an AI-powered company. Here is the typeface that they are using. It is called Plus Jakarta Sans. It's by Toko Type. Toko Type, hopefully I'm saying that right. They do other fonts. They have other commercial fonts and stuff like that you can purchase. This is the only one that's free on Google Fonts. So there's nothing else I'm going to show you from them. But you can see they've got a bunch of different weights here, but this is actually a variable font. So I've already got it loaded up here into Affinity Designer, and it says extra bold there, but you've got the weight right here that you can adjust. So you can take it from 800 all the way down to 200, and those are just going to be how bold or not it is. And then you also have the italic version of it. So you can change the variable weight. The italic is just, an on or off. It's not like some fonts have like an axis for the italics, and so you can kind of slant it a little more or less. Can't do that here, it's binary, but you can adjust the boldness. I have these two pieces on here right now because I wanted to show, I was just testing this out on my own. I thought I'd leave it on the screen. Very important for an educational company to be able to create your own fractions because, typically you'll get a font that has like simple fractions and stuff like that, but this is entirely editable. And yes, you could always do this on your own if you wanted, but they've got it built into the typeface. And you can see over here on the right side, this font is deep. It has tons and tons and tons of Latin characters. So if we look, you're really not going to be able to see these. I'm going to tell you what it has. Basic Latin, Latin 1 supplement, Latin extended A, Latin extended B, and then it even has Latin extended additional. It has tons and tons of letter forms on here. but I have the A sitting here because you can see there are 4 different alternates just for this one character. And there are a bunch of characters like this. Obviously not all of them. You know, if you're talking about a lowercase l, let's see what they have. Lowercase l has 3 of them. So let me go ahead and show you. LLL. Oops, that's caps. LLL. And we can get some alternates on here. One with a little tail on it, one with a curved little tail on it. So you can really kind of mix and match and do whatever you want with this, plus Jakarta Sans. Another font that I wasn't familiar with prior to this, but it seems really solid. It's open source. It's got an OFL, which is an open font license. And anything that you can get on Google Fonts is going to be OFL. You can just download it, use it. You can use it on your website. You can use it on print material. Doesn't matter. If it's on Google Fonts, it's free to use. Don't worry about the license. Just do what you want. I'm 99.9% sure. Double check that. But you can see right here, it says for this license, it says it's got a SIL open font license on it. So you can basically do nearly anything you want. I think that if you want to like edit the font and then sell it and stuff like that, there might be some things where you need to like keep it in the metadata that it was originally designed by Tokotype, things like that. I don't think most of us are going to be doing that. And if you are at the level that you're doing that, you already understand this. But Google Fonts is great in general if you're not familiar. Google Fonts it's by Google. It has tons of typefaces and they're all free. You can download them or you can use Google to host the fonts for you, and you can have them on your website. I would self-host them just because if you're using these from Google hosting them, it might be faster, it might not, but they will track more on your website. And that's why they do this. They give you these for free so that they can have more data on people on websites. So this is the typeface that Pearson is using. Prior to this, they were using Open Sans and Playfair Display. So I just want to show you the old logo and look at what it looked like before the rebrand so that you can see, maybe you can understand a little bit more about my disappointment in this rebrand. Because this rebrand, this was from 2016, I believe. Yeah, let's just look at the top. We can see when the article was written. Yeah, this was January 2016. So 9 years ago. Most brands in 9 years are overdue for a rebrand. Trends change, especially if you're kind of hopping on those trends. And you can see some of these mock-ups here. Like, I think these are super fun. I think these are really cool, but they also do look like they were made in 2016. But you can really tell this is aimed at education. This is aimed at textbooks. And it's not like they're leaving education, but this really feels like a textbook company. It feels like educating young minds. You've got the serif typeface on there. I'm not sure if that's Playfair Display or not. No, they're using Playfair Display for like these other ones. I'm not sure what that logo typeface was. We could probably figure it out. But I don't know that it's the most important because that's not the rebrand. But yeah, so you can see they're using Playfair Display and Open Sans. So they were using open source fonts prior to the rebrand as well, which makes sense. It's a giant company. It would cost them a bunch of money, and they're all about saving money. It's a publicly traded company, so yeah, any chance to save shareholders money, I get it. What I find very striking is you can see just the visual difference between this and this, right? Like these are tangible. You could touch these pieces, you've got posters that are mock-ups. They've got this spiral bound brand guide here. You've got posters, you've got people, you've got they do have a little bit of digital on here, but like it just feels so much more personal. It feels so much more human. And when you go up and look at what they're saying, let me see if I can find it here. And there was a different VP of a global brand because before it was Rebecca Sinclair. Let me see if I can find it because it's super important for the point that I'm trying to make. And I guess I should have written it down. I know it has something, it says about the thumb. Oh my gosh, this is embarrassing. Basically, they say that this is like a human first design. Oh, no, no, no. I know where it's at. It's on, they linked it on the design, this website. They'd written about the article from 2016. I'm like 90% sure that's where they wrote it before. Oh, this is the same article, isn't it? Oh, no, no, no. I know where it is. My brain is working now. So I found the actual like logo guidelines online. This is just a PDF. It was on their website. I figured I'd scoop it up before they entirely deleted it. But they're talking about the interrobang here and how they use that for their logo. And I think it's a really cool idea. And even the person that redesigned the new logo said like they were a fan of the interrobang. They were a fan of the previous branding, but that person accepted that the goal was to change the brand, that that Pearson wanted to go in a different direction. So even the person who created the new brand appreciated the old brand, and I think that says something. But it says, we've adopted the interrobang as our brand mark because it captures two essential principles at Pearson: the curiosity to know and discover, and the excitement and fun of learning. I love that. I really do. Our customized interrobang brand mark has been carefully crafted and encapsulated in a thumbprint, which symbolizes our human-centric approach, putting the learner at the heart of everything we do. Let me see if I can get my thing back on the screen. Our human-centric approach of putting the learner at the heart of everything we do. And you can really feel that in this brand. If we take nothing else from this, look at the typography, look at the branding. This feels like a human-centered brand, right? When we look at these old pieces of these old mock-ups, these old touch points, this feels like a brand for humans. This AI, global AI-powered leader, this doesn't feel like a brand for humans anymore. In the typography and the branding, it does exactly what it's supposed to. It does a very good job at it. This isn't to say anything bad about anyone, about Landor, about this word mark, about the typography, anything. It just is a conversation about the trajectory of Pearson, but also the trajectory of a lot of brands and companies in general. I think a lot of people are really leaning into this AI stuff, and I think time will tell where that goes. Maybe I sound like a Luddite right now. I don't know. We were talking about Chat GPT yesterday. I am not opposed to AI. I am opposed to not putting humans first. And the last thing I'll point out here, this has less to do with typography, but when you scroll down here, it says 8,000 Pearson employees. When we look back at the 2016 article here, it says 40,000 employs 40,000 people. So in 9 years, they've cut their workforce from 40,000 to 18,000. They did expand their countries, though. They went from 70 countries to 200 companies. But they cut their humans in half, and they're no longer human-centered, they're AI-powered. And I think that comes through in the branding. So the branding is effective, the typography is effective, it does what it's supposed to do. Landor didn't do a bad job doing this. They executed. But it changes everything. Let's go back to this interview with Michael Bierut. And I'm going to do something we haven't done before. I'm going to try to play a little bit of the audio on here and see if we can make this make sense. Give me a second to get my headphones on so that I can hear it. And then we'll set this up in OBS so that you can hear it as well. And if this is a disaster, then, we'll try again a different time. But I want to point out a couple of different things because this conversation was really big. It goes through a bunch of different topics. But I want to point out some of the things about branding that Michael Bierut talks about. And some of these do have to do with typography too, so we'll get there.
I think when you're in design school, either explicitly or implicitly in your training, is that the highest goal of design is to invent something wholly new, and that the best thing for any design solution is to devise something that's utterly revolutionary and hence unfamiliar. And obviously, even when I put it that way, you can sort of see the catch, right? I've worked with law firms, for instance, and every presentation, sometimes they present it to me. They'll sort of say, here's the brief, and they'll show me their website and they'll show me their 8 competitors' website in a 3x3 grid on a PowerPoint. And they'll say, look, these all look the same. And, at first I thought, well, let me add it. I'll fix that. And I'll say, what if you had the craziest looking website in the law profession? And you realize that they don't want that any more than they want to go to a customer so they can show up in court wearing Revolutionary War garb or a sexy devil costume. Or so they want to look nondescript so that their ideas actually lead.
Okay, so let me take these off. And let's go ahead and mute the audio. I'm going to go through a couple of different, real quick clips, but just to give some commentary on this, I think what he's pointing out there is very much in line with the approach that Studio Moross took to this Glitterbox campaign. They were building, they were evolving. They weren't entirely changing the brand. And this goes back to Glitterbox too. Glitterbox, is the Glitterbox and Pearson. In the end, they're the ones that decide what happens with their brands. It's not about Studio Moross. It's not about Landor. They're at the whims, of the person that signs their paycheck in the end. Not that they didn't do the work. They did the work. But when you think about these two different approaches, one is an evolution, one is living with the brand, and the other is a complete 180 from human to AI. Maybe that's the right bet. Maybe that's the right bet for Pearson. But I do think that there's an interesting conversation to be had here. Let me go ahead and play another clip. Oops. I turned off the desktop audio. Here we go.
The work that they're about to replace, Designers have always, in my opinion, been too enthusiastic about change and not as interested in continuity. I think invention is exciting and maintenance is boring. And I think a lot of times the first question I'll ask someone who is successful, who sort of says they want to change the thing they have, regardless what it is, I say, you seem to be doing okay. Why do you want to change this thing? Why don't you keep this thing? And usually then that's a great question to get people to really disclose what is really the reason they want to change it. Because if they have enough money to hire me, they've reached a certain degree of success. They're not failing usually. And so there's some other reason that's motivating them. And teasing that out a lot of times is the trick.
Okay. So once again, just to add a little bit of commentary, I don't know that I'm in a position to say anything about what Michael Bierut's saying. But I think if we just look at these two projects, and I don't need to pick on Pearson, and I don't need to glaze Glitterbox, but I do think they've taken two entirely different approaches. You've got two successful brands, and obviously one is much younger than the other, but Glitterbox isn't a new company. I believe that the festival started in 2014. The brand, the parent brand of that, started in 1999. So they've been in the game for long enough to where if they wanted to do a complete 180 and change this branding, they could. I don't know how long they've had this original branding that they're evolving right now with Studio Moross, but when we're thinking about what Michael is saying here, Michael Bierut's saying here, we always do want to make something new. We want to create something new. We want to put our stamp on the world. We want to do what we want. Let's go ahead and get the face cam here so I can make my point. We want to put our stamp on the world, right? Like I do. I want to make something that's just mine. I wanted to create objectives and I want to do this and I wanted to, I have these art projects that I want to do. I have these design projects I want to do. I want to do these animation things. I don't want to go work for some other company. I want to do my thing. When I was doing branding for clients, if they came to me and wanted to rebrand, yes, please, like it's so exciting. You want to do that. But the projects that were where I was being sort of a steward to the brand, honestly, some of those were, I don't want to say they were more fulfilling, but like I felt like I did something more important almost. And I created some brands that I'm very proud of, and I created some designs I'm very proud of that were entirely, original in whatever sense of the word, you want that to be. They weren't built on anything else. It was an entirely, an entire startup or like an entirely new festival or a new publication, whatever it was. I've created brand new things, but I worked with housing developer or worked with some local places in Las Vegas, and I wouldn't be entirely doing a rebrand. I'd be doing something similar to what Studio Moross was doing with Glitterbox, where I'm evolving what they already have. Or maybe they're just creating an extra line in whatever their product is that they're delivering, and they want to use the same typography. You can make it look good with what it is. And like Michael Bierut saying here, I think a lot of people undervalue the continuity, the consistency, the stewardship of a brand because it's hard to not want to change things. I'm sure if you're a designer and you've ever made a brand guideline for a company, you told them like, hey, here's the font, here's the colors, don't use other things, don't change the logo. And as soon as they do, it kind of breaks your heart a little bit because, that if they just stick with consistent colors, if they stick with consistent typography, and obviously there's wiggle room for that. Look at the Glitterbox thing, but they found a very creative way to maintain that consistently. We talked about it. They did it with the typography. They did it with these archetypes. But a lot of places aren't able to pull that off. And entirely throwing everything out the window, it can be exciting. And this new global brand VP gets to make their mark, and this designer gets to throw everything out the window and do what they want. I'm not going to play the clip from it, but there was a portion of the interview where Michael's talking about the Saks Fifth Avenue logo, and they're hired to do the newest one that we've got here from 2006 to forward, and it is essentially this 1970s logo. And he was talking about how they did some versions of it to update this 1996 to 2006 version. They did some versions where they entirely threw out everything they had and created it with new typography, new fonts, things like that. And what he had to come back to was like, if we throw out everything that we have for Saks Fifth Avenue for this brand, we're not different from a brand new company, other than the name. We're not different from any other brand that's starting from zero. Saks has heritage, Saks has history, Saks has a relationship with people. And this logo that was used for 23 years from 1973 to 1996 looks beautiful with this slight evolution and the box. And I don't know if you've ever seen someone carrying around a Saks Fifth Avenue bag. I should have pulled up the images before this. But this logo that's been used for the last 19 years, maybe they'll destroy it here in the next couple of years. It looks like every 20 years they're rebranding. It's an icon, and it just speaks to who it should speak to. And so I think when you go from the 70s to the 90s to the 2006, I think there's a reason that they kind of went back to this older logo, and it just feels right. And maybe we'll see some of these handwritten ones because it looks like they've come back to these a few times over the decades. Maybe that'll be the next move. But I don't know. I think there's something to be said here, and maybe I'm not getting to my point very well. I did want to point out the Jupiter to Japan presentation that I talked about the other day that was part of Typographics. Oh, you know what? I wasn't even showing you the screen. Oh my goodness. Okay, here are the two logos. I apologize. Saks Fifth Avenue from the 70s. Here's the 2006 one so that we can look at it just real quick. If you're familiar with Saks, you know this logo. But they're the two logos that I was trying to talk about when you were just staring at my face. But in the Jupiter to Japan presentation that was given by David, oh gosh, I'm not going to remember his name now, David Heasty. Let's click on it and see. David Heasty. He got asked, is there any dream project that you like to do? And he was basically like, no, not really. Like, what he wants to do is what Michael Bierut was talking about is what Studio Moross did with Glitterbox, is do evolutions with these brands. And let's see if I can find it real quick. I know that it's in this area. I think I wrote a note about it, but let me see if I can find it. Oh wait, here it is. Okay, so he did this Nike NYC logo, and he's talking about how, you know, this logo has been around forever. And at this point in the game, you have to imagine anything that can be done with this logo has been done with this logo. But you white out the I, you white out the leg of the K, you white out that crossbar on the E, and you've got NYC. And it's just using the same typography, using the Futura that's already on there, but you've created this entirely new thing. And he said that's what his, you know, he went on to end up and eventually kind of expand into saying like any dream client for him is one that lets him cook, basically, like lets him do what he wants. But he said his dream clients are clients like this, where he can basically build upon, you know, he didn't say this, but I'm going to say it. You know, we say like standing on the shoulders of giants. And I think when you're thinking about branding, sometimes we don't have to throw out everything, including the humans. You know, we can evolve it. And we can do that with good typography. And, you know, we saw that with the Saks Fifth Avenue. Going from there, we saw that with Studio Moross, them using this Dum Dum Studio serial type family incredibly well, maintaining the Glitterbox wordmark, and just developing around this, expanding it, evolving it. I know this episode was much more typography adjacent, but hopefully, you know, and typography never lives in a vacuum. So there's going to be days when we talk new fonts, and then there's going to be days we talk about, you know, font like software or innovations or business things related to the typefaces, tools. Sometimes we're going to talk about typography as it exists in the real world, which is going to be how it exists alongside brands, within brand identities, and how it is a vessel, how it is the voice for these brand identities, and whether that's an evolution and an expansion of a super cool brand like Glitterbox, or whether that is taking the humanity out of a brand and turning it into an AI-powered learning platform. Time will tell what ends up happening with them. It doesn't necessarily matter. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. We're carrying it. We're talking about typography here, and so it doesn't necessarily matter at all what ends up happening with Pearson. And I can be wrong, and that's fine. I'll learn a lesson from being wrong. But I think that all of us can think a little bit more about, does everything need to be changed, or could we evolve this? Is there something here that's worth saving, or do we need to entirely change everything? Sometimes it's worth changing everything. Airbnb changed their logo a while, whenever that was. Instagram changed their logo to the gradient. Everyone copied them. Um, you know, there's plenty of times when complete rebrands go incredibly well. Um, I just question. Maybe I'm just so inundated by AI stuff, AI talk right now, that I'm just really starting to question: is this the emperor's new clothes? Are we all pretending that AI is something that it's not? I would love to end this on typography, but I'm just going to say one more thing about this AI. Maybe make people mad. Um, I'm not against AI. AI. Um, I don't want my stuff to be stolen. Obviously, I've had enough of my stuff stolen. I've had NBC Universal is selling my stolen artwork right now. Um, but I think we need to recognize that, like, these AI, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, whatever bot you're talking to, it doesn't actually think. It's a predictive text model that puts one word after the other and chooses this is the most likely word that's going to make sense to go here. And so when a company, like a learning company, wants to get rid of the textbooks, wants to like move away from the human tangible things and go into an area where everything is AI powered, I don't know. It's a little bit sad. It's a little disappointing, and I do think that the typography accurately represents that. It's much colder. So good job, Landor, with the rebrand. It looks like what it should look like, but I just wish that we had more Studio Moross, Glitterbox in the world. I know everything can't be Glitterbox, but go listen to the interview with Michael Bierut. Go check out the new design podcast, By Design, by Fast Company. And then subscribe and come back tomorrow, because I will have the Friday episode of Typography News. It'll be number 8. And yeah, I'll see you then. Bye.